We thought we were ready. The military had prepared us for everything. But nothing could prepare us for them. Aliens who laughed at our weapons like they were toys. And then one of us took down their warship. This is the story of how the world's mightiest military faced something beyond comprehension, and how we fought back. It started with the strange signals. At first, we thought it was just another anomaly. But this time, it wasn't a glitch or a satellite misfire. The transmissions were too coherent, too precise. Our experts had never seen anything like it before. Military leaders convened, and after weeks of decoding, they finally agreed. We weren't alone. We had no idea what was coming. No one did. The first sighting of the ships was a blur, a flash in the sky. The air crackled with energy as the massive craft descended, hovering above the city. No one had time to react. The military had no defense against such an unknown force. They didn't even know what we were dealing with. The government called for a full lockdown, martial law. The military was on high alert. We watched in disbelief as the aliens landed, and when they finally emerged, they were nothing like the movies had prepared us for. No little green men, no glowing eyes. These were beings of pure power, towering over us like gods, their technology light years ahead of ours. The first words they spoke were in a language we couldn't understand, but the tone, it was mocking. They laughed. They laughed at us, at our weapons, our technology, at the whole human race. They stood there, looking down at us like we were nothing more than ants beneath their feet. Our military, our best and brightest, had nothing for them. They looked at our fighter jets, our tanks, our guns, and scoffed. It was clear we were outmatched. The aliens didn't even bother to engage us at first. They hovered, analyzing, observing. We were nothing to them. We weren't even worth their attention. They let us stew in our fear, our uncertainty. They laughed again, not just at our weapons, but at the entire idea of us trying to challenge them. But then, something unexpected happened. One of our soldiers, a nobody, just a regular guy, nothing special, stepped forward. He wasn't part of the plan. He wasn't on the front lines, didn't have the best tech, didn't have the experience the generals had. He was just a man. And in that moment, when everything seemed lost, he did something that changed everything. He fired. It wasn't a perfect shot, not by any means. It was clumsy, desperate, and hopeless. But it hit, and it was enough to make them stop laughing. The shot rang out, echoing across the empty streets. The soldiers around me froze. The aliens' laughter died down, replaced by a deafening silence. For a moment, we all thought the world had ended. Our weapons, our military, everything we knew, had failed to make any impact. But this was different. The alien warship, which had previously been impervious to everything, suddenly shuddered. The soldier who had taken the shot didn't know it, but he had hit something important. That one desperate move, that single act of defiance, had pierced through their invincible exterior. The alien ship's energy shield flickered. It wasn't much, just a glimmer of vulnerability, like a crack in a fortress's wall, but it was enough to turn the tides. The aliens stopped moving, their expressions unreadable behind their sleek helmets. They exchanged looks, their calm demeanor faltering. It was as if they couldn't comprehend what had just happened. For the first time since their arrival, they seemed concerned. They weren't sure what to do next. They had expected us to bow down, to surrender without resistance. Instead, they had underestimated us. One shot, one brave soldier. And now, the balance of power was starting to shift. The air was thick with tension. Everyone waited for the retaliation, but it never came. The aliens didn't strike back immediately. They hovered, assessing the situation. It was clear they hadn't expected us to fight back, not with such ferocity. It wasn't the kind of warfare they had anticipated. Our weapons were primitive, our tactics unrefined, but in that moment, they had learned an important lesson. Human resolve can't be measured in technology alone. The military leaders scrambled to respond. They hadn't prepared for this. The idea of using such basic weapons to strike back at an alien force, one capable of interstellar travel, of wielding unimaginable power, was something no one had ever imagined. But now they had a target. The vulnerability was real. The alien ship's shield had a crack in it, and that crack, no matter how small, was a chink in their armor that we needed to exploit. Commanders rallied troops. Engineers worked around the clock to adapt our weapons, and every military strategist knew that this would be the key moment. The aliens had made one mistake. They had underestimated us. What followed was a strange and unexpected turn of events. Our military didn't just try to match their technology. They improvised. They used their knowledge of our own weapons in ways the aliens didn't expect. The shot that had been fired was enough to ignite a plan to not only defend ourselves, but to strike back harder than we had ever imagined. This wasn't just a battle of weapons anymore. It was a fight for survival. The next few days were filled with tense moments as the military adjusted, adapted, and fought to close the gap between our primitive weapons and the alien technology. It wasn't just about firepower anymore. It was about resilience, determination, and the will to survive against all odds. And then, just when we thought it couldn't get crazier, they came back. They came back in full force. The sky rippled with the roar of alien ships descending from the clouds. They weren't just retaliating. They were angry, their ships moving with the precision and speed of predators. It was a full-scale assault, a demonstration of just how far ahead they were in terms of weaponry and tactics. Our troops, still reeling from the shock of the previous encounter, found themselves outgunned and outmatched in every sense. But this time, something had changed. The fear wasn't gone, but it had shifted into something else. Determination. We had learned, adapted, and we were no longer fighting just to survive. We were fighting with purpose. Our weaponry, still primitive compared to their advanced technology, had improved in leaps and bounds since the first shot. Engineers had worked around the clock, modifying our old missiles and artillery, trying to find a way to breach their shields. And though we couldn't replicate their high-tech weapons, we began to see small victories, chinks in their armor. The moment that changed everything came when a fighter pilot, a young woman from a small town in Texas, pulled off the impossible. Her craft had been modified with the best technology we could muster, and with a single, perfectly timed strike, she pierced the alien warship's outer shell. It wasn't a massive explosion. It didn't cause a chain reaction like in the movies. But that one breach, that small crack, was enough. The ship began to lose its stability, its once impenetrable defenses flickering and failing. And it wasn't just the technology that was failing. The aliens, proud and arrogant, thinking they could conquer us easily, began to retreat. We had done something they didn't think possible. We had taken down one of their warships with nothing but willpower and determination, with a little bit of ingenuity and a whole lot of luck. The military's command center erupted in chaos, but not from fear. They were shocked, yes, but more than that, they were energized. This wasn't just about a single warship anymore. This was about showing the aliens that we were capable of standing up for ourselves, even if it meant taking down one of their ships with whatever we could get our hands on. In the midst of this victory, a strange sense of unity washed over us. We weren't just individuals anymore. We were a collective force, one that had refused to bow down. The enemy had assumed they could destroy us with ease, but they had underestimated the human spirit. Our primitive weapons, our raw, unrefined determination, had achieved the impossible. But with the enemy retreating, the truth was starting to sink in. It wasn't just one alien warship we had taken down. It was the beginning of something bigger, something that would change the course of the conflict. This wasn't just about weapons and tactics anymore. This was about a fight for identity, for survival, and for a planet that refused to be subdued. And then came the question that no one could shake. What would they do next? The aliens didn't retreat because they were afraid. No, they retreated because they were recalibrating. They were learning. And when they came back stronger, faster, and with ferocity that no one expected. We had scratched the surface of their superiority, and now they were playing a different game. It wasn't just about power anymore. It was about strategy, about testing our weaknesses, about breaking us down mentally. The first sign of their response came in the form of a new kind of weapon, one we couldn't even begin to understand. Their ships had always been fast, but now they were moving at an almost impossible speed, flickering in and out of visibility. as though they were bending time itself. And the weapons, these weren't the conventional lasers or energy blasts we had seen before. These were precision strikes that could disable entire military bases in seconds. They were surgical, clinical. We weren't ready. Our defenses, which had worked against their old weaponry, crumbled under the new assault. Entire cities fell in the blink of an eye. I remember watching the footage, buildings collapsing, people running for their lives, their faces painted with a mixture of fear and disbelief. The aliens were pushing us to the brink, and it was clear they had decided that we were no longer worth the effort of trying to reason with. They weren't here to negotiate. They weren't here to talk. They were here to win. The United Nations scrambled. Military alliances formed and fractured. Old political borders crumbled under the weight of the alien onslaught. And while our military tried to fight back with everything we had, we soon realized that it wasn't just our weapons that were at stake. It was our very sense of self. Our way of life was being torn apart, not by the aliens' power, but by our inability to comprehend their true motives. And then, when it seemed like we couldn't take any more, something strange happened. The aliens, who had been so brutal, so focused on domination, suddenly stopped. There was a long silence, a pause that stretched for what felt like days. And in that moment, as I watched from the military command center, I saw something shift. The aliens were confused. It wasn't fear. It wasn't hesitation. It was something else, something like respect. We had done the unthinkable. We had taken down one of their warships, and now we had survived their retaliatory strike. It wasn't just the loss of a battle they had calculated. It was a realization that this war was going to be different. We weren't going to bow down. We were going to make them fight for every inch of ground. The war, I realized, had taken on a new meaning. It wasn't just about weapons or technology. It was about willpower. And then, just as quickly as the pause had begun, the aliens came back with a new plan. They weren't going to destroy us with brute force. No, they were going to break us down from the inside out. They were going to make us question ourselves. They would make us turn on each other. The real war began when they stopped attacking our military. The aliens had learned something crucial. They realized that destroying our cities and killing our soldiers wasn't enough. The true power of a civilization lies not just in its military might, but in its collective psyche. So they began targeting our minds, exploiting our fears, and planting doubt in our hearts. It wasn't immediate, but it was insidious. They used their technology to manipulate communications, to twist our perceptions. Governments were undermined, leaders became paranoid, and alliances fractured. They didn't need to launch a single attack after that. They had created the perfect storm of confusion and distrust. People began to question everything. Was the war even real? Were the aliens truly enemies, or had we been misled? The fabric of society began to unravel as distrust became the currency of the day. I watched it all unfold, helpless. The more we fought back physically, the more they pulled the strings behind the scenes, causing us to fight among ourselves. And the more we resisted, the more the paranoia spread. Even within the military, we couldn't tell who was loyal and who had been compromised. Soldiers started turning on each other, unsure of who was truly on their side. There was no unity, no collective purpose, just an overwhelming sense of chaos. In our darkest moments, they showed us the ultimate weapon, the manipulation of truth itself. They didn't need to destroy us. They needed to make us destroy ourselves. With every whisper of doubt, with every fabricated story, with every planted rumor, they were sowing the seeds of division. We fought to survive, but we were losing the war from within. The aliens weren't just taking over our world. They were taking over our minds. I saw families torn apart. Friends who had been close for years no longer spoke to each other. The question was no longer about survival. It was about whether we could trust the people sitting next to us, whether we could trust our own instincts. We had become prisoners not just of the aliens, but of our own fears. And with every passing day, we fell deeper into their trap. But I knew that we couldn't let this happen. We couldn't let them win without a fight. Even though the aliens had succeeded in breaking our unity, there was still a spark within us, something they hadn't counted on, our resilience. We were still human. And despite the chaos, the paranoia, the fear, there was still a part of us that refused to break. The question was, could we come together in time to fight back, or had the aliens already won the most important battle? The one for our minds? It seemed hopeless, doesn't it? The aliens had shattered our unity, made us question everything we had ever believed. They had used our own minds against us, manipulated us to the point where the fight for survival was no longer a matter of just defeating them physically, but also of reclaiming our humanity. But as the world crumbled under the weight of their psychological warfare, something began to shift. It wasn't instantaneous, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, a quiet revolution started to stir. People began to wake up. The paranoia still simmered, but new understanding began to take hold. They could break our bodies. They could break our cities. They could break our alliances, but they couldn't break us entirely. The more we resisted the mental warfare, the more we began to realize that the aliens underestimated one thing: the strength of the human will. The spark they tried so hard to extinguish only flared higher. It started with small, grassroots movements. Groups of people from all walks of life, soldiers, civilians, the broken and the battered, began to unite. We weren't unified by weapons or armies, but by a common goal: to reclaim our world and to reclaim our minds. We realized the truth that had been hidden from us. The real battle wasn't about military might. It was about staying human in the face of the impossible. As our resistance grew, so did the aliens' desperation. They had never anticipated that their manipulation of our minds would spark such defiance. They had underestimated the strength of the human spirit. And so, they made one final, desperate push. They launched a full-scale assault, one that would have crushed us if not for the people who had found the courage to rise above the chaos. I watched as ordinary citizens, soldiers, and leaders alike came together, not as fractured groups, but as a united force with one purpose. We understood now that our strength didn't come from our weapons, but from our willpower, our determination. We fought back with everything we had left, not because we thought we could win, but because we knew that if we didn't fight, we would lose more than just a war. We would lose ourselves. The final battle was intense, and it didn't unfold the way anyone expected. It wasn't about victory through force. It was about victory through defiance. The aliens threw everything they had at us, but we stood tall, refusing to bend, refusing to give up. And in the end, it wasn't their technology, their weapons, or their mind games that defeated us. It was our refusal to be defeated. When the dust settled, we realized that we had won. Not because we had defeated the aliens in a traditional sense, but because we had held on to our humanity. We had fought back against not just their ships, but their manipulation, their divide and conquer tactics. And in doing so, we had proven something. No matter how advanced they were, no matter how powerful, the human spirit could not be broken. We had learned the hardest lesson of all. The true strength of a people lies not in their weapons, but in their unity and resolve.